Allan Lokos is the founder and guiding teacher of the Community Meditation Center in New York City. He is the author of Patience, The Art of Peaceful Living, Pocket Peace, Effective Practices for Enlightened Living, and Through the Flames, Overcoming Disaster Through Compassion, Patience, and Determination. The book recounts his recovery after surviving a horrific plane crash with his wife Susanna in Myanmar on Christmas Day in 2012. Now, this is a harrowing book, there's no doubt about it. And for you, what do you think was the most important part of the healing process?
Mm. uh, I would say just simply healing because it was the opinion of the doctors that I wasn't going to survive. So just healing, because it's a funny thing about that. I had no idea how seriously I was injured. I was out of it most of the time. Um, I think I think that I think we don't know. There's a lot we don't know about healing. I think we know quite a bit about healing from a medical perspective. Uh, we're just now really getting into understanding about trauma and healing from trauma. And I around that quite a bit because my wife is a trauma therapist, and of course, something like a plane crash is a trauma, but so is divorce, so is an illness, so is suddenly realizing a car almost hit you, even though it didn't. It's a traumatic moment. Uh, Loss of your job, loss of a loved one. These are traumatic moments. Um, I believe that I survived because of the 20 some odd years that preceded that accident. Specifically, I had spent the first 30 years of my adult life as a performer, professional singer and actor on Broadway and the Opera House, etc. After all of that time in the theater, for reasons I don't really understand, but I got very involved in the Buddhist path, and with that, meditation, mindfulness practice, etc. And ultimately went on and really did some serious study and practice and became a teacher. You mentioned that you actually said I was the guiding teacher of the Community Meditation Center, which was true up until about 4 weeks ago, when I stepped back and said it's time for a younger person. But I had put in my 15 years, and I spent about another month helping my successor, making sure that he's comfortable. We're very excited about who we have found. But that practice of meditation, even though for weeks I wasn't really conscious, I didn't know where I was, I didn't know what I was doing, that practice is still within you. Everything that we've experienced in life is within us, even though it's not consciously with us in a given moment. But every moment that has preceded this moment makes who we are in this moment. I think that makes sense to anyone, even if they haven't ever looked at a Buddhist teaching or if they haven't meditated. Uh, we didn't just drop out of the sky into this moment. We are all that has preceded us. We are all that we are part of in this moment. And, many times after I wrote that book, Through the Flames, uh, I did a lot of interviews, radio and television. That's all part of the promotion of the book. And I was asked again and again, uh, did I ever have the thought, why me? Why was I going through this? And my answer was always the same. No, I had never had that thought. But if I did have the thought, why me? The only logical answer would be, why not me? Why would I be exempt from these things that happen in life? It actually is the very first teaching that the Buddha ever authored. Uh, he said, essentially said, life is difficult. The word, and I wish it wasn't translated this way, but the word in Sanskrit and the Pali language, the language that was spoken at the time of the Buddha, the word is dukkha. And dukkha is most often translated into English as suffering. But I think that that translation is misleading because in our culture here, across the pond from you, suffering is most often about that terrible time that grandma went through just before she died, uh, dealing with the terminal illness, really, really big stuff. And yes, that is dukkha. But as the term dukkha is so much bigger than that, it includes that big stuff and it includes the noise outside my window. It includes stubbing your toe on the sidewalk. It includes those beautiful shoes you bought yesterday and you put them on today and they're too tight. It includes the annoying phone call. It's it's all of that. And that's just part of life. It's not that there's something wrong. Nobody wanted a plane crash. The pilot didn't get up in the morning and say, well, I think I'll crash the plane today. There were about 78 of us on board. None of us got on board thinking the plane would crash. None of us woke up that morning thinking, well, I'm going to die today. So I think that is a significant part of healing, the acceptance of the nature of reality, the nature of what our experience really is. And I think it's part of healing because we're not fighting. We're not fighting against reality, what actually is. Now, can I prove that? No, not the way a scientist can prove in the lab that penicillin will cure this because, and I've watched it time and again, he or she says, and it works. But my situation after that crash was followed by doctors and hospitals and medical people literally around the world. I don't even know why. Some of it's because I'm an author and some important people got involved, and Desmond Tutu was known to be saying prayers for us and just other things like that. So doctors literally around the world studying what was going on with me, and never said it to me, but my wife was kept informed and um, made aware that the likelihood of my surviving was zero. They have a formula now in the medical world when it comes to severe burns, what they call full thickness burns. They don't say first, second, and third degree anymore. Full thickness is really bad. So they add your age to the percentage of your body that is experienced full thickness burns. And if that gets up near 100, that total, you're in bad shape. And I was well over 100. So, but there was one doctor in Singapore. This, I was just actually telling someone about him today. To call him a doctor is it doesn't even do him complete service. He just um, I don't know how to describe him because I've never known anyone uh, like like this man BK Tan or Tan Bien Kim, depending on which country you're in. Um, BK told me later when he came to the United States and we did some hanging out together. He said, "No, I didn't think you would die because when I cut into your body," he was about to amputate two fingers because they were so injured. And he said, "When I cut in, I could feel the life force was too strong." And he said, "No, he's not going to die." And then actually, there was some bleeding. And to a doctor, that's a very good sign because that means there's life there. So I still have those fingers. They're a little bit bent, but that's okay. Um, anyway, that's a rather long answer to a difficult question about healing. As I said, and to sum it up, I think there's a lot we know about healing on a physical level. I think there's a lot we don't know on a on a mental and metaphysical level, and maybe we won't ever know. But I mean, all that I can say is I'm here.
Yeah. And actually, I wanted to ask you because I guess there's a slight variation between recovery and healing, isn't it? So, how long would you say it took you to recover and then heal from this like horrible experience?
Well, the accident took place on Christmas Day, 2012, and after going through various places, trying to find a burn unit someplace, I ended up in Singapore. This was, the hero of the story is my wife, who refused to quit. Uh, to go into all of that because some of it is harrowing. Um, but she managed to get me to Singapore, where there's a very good burn unit, and that's where I met BK Tang. Uh, so I know I was there on January 1st because that's when he became the head of this unit. And I think within a week, I was medevaced to the United States. He felt it was very important that I be home. And then they estimated that I would be in intensive care for 6 months and then begin therapy. I was out of intensive care, went through physical therapy, and living at home in only 2 months. And I was back teaching full time in 3 months.
Oh my God! Wow, that's incredible.
So now, when I went back to teach for the first time, my fully shaved head was full of scars. I used to hold then how old would he be? That was, what, 10 years ago, whatever it was, my little grandson. I held him up, and to make sure he could be comfortable with what he was seeing, I said, "Count those little scars on my head and tell me how many there are, because each time now, in the coming weeks and months, when you get up to count them again, there are going to be fewer and fewer of them until there are none." And he would kind of think there was something like 40 to start with, and then there were 35. And anyway, so he did very well. He didn't ever seem to become upset by it. He'd ask me how I was feeling, etc. Uh, so recovery, I don't know. Sometimes I have four dictionaries, four paper books next to my desk, and several more online because I found that when I write, I ask myself, do I really know what that word means? I've been using that word forever and ever. And I look them up and I said, wow, that's not really exactly what I thought. So recovery and healing, interesting. Um, Am I fully recovered? I'm as fully recovered as I'm going to be. Am
Yeah.
I physically the way I was on December 24th of 2012? No, but I'm also 8.5 years older and a
Mm.
legitimate senior at this point. Um, so, and I do think about this sometimes. What is the difference between what I can do physically today, having been through this accident, compared to what I might be able to do if I hadn't been in an accident? It's a meaningless question, but if I visit the doctor and he said, "Well, what about this or that?" and then I think about that, what would be the difference? Healing, I don't know. I think that we could probably expand the concept of healing, uh, to bring it into a spiritual realm. But
Mm.
then, of course,
Yeah.
you would have every right to ask me to define what is spiritual, and I hope you don't, because I've never really been able to come up with a definition that I'm comfortable with, because all of my dictionaries choose to define that which is spiritual as saying that which is not material or not of the material world.
Mm.
I don't like definitions that tell you
Yeah.
what it is not.
Yeah.
So that which is spiritual, that which we experience as spirituality, um, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit like, don't they say about pornography? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
I like the analogy of
And my
spirituality to
apologies to
pornography.
someone who would feel that the comparison of pornography and spirituality don't belong in the same sentence. I was only looking to make a point. Um, I feel,
Humor is necessary.
I feel very comfortable today, um, especially since I'm fortunate enough to be able to look back on a difficult childhood, that included a lot of physical abuse. My mother died when she was very young. My father was seriously mentally ill. It was difficult. But with that, I can look at my life today and say, wow, this is incredible. Whereas I think if I
Mm.
had grown up with wealth and everyone telling me how much they loved me, which I never had, I don't know that I could appreciate that. I watched,
Yeah.
um, just before, it's just after 3 where I am in New York, starting at about 2:30, just before seeing you, my little grandson, 12 years old, received an award from his school,
Oh,
which they consider the highest award that they can give. And he was being hugged and kissed by everyone, as he has been all his life.
mm,
And my wife Susanna and I look at that all the time and say, how great. What we
mm,
didn't have, he has. And
mm.
it's wonderful. But I do think a friend of mine wrote a book, um, and the subtitle of the book is The Spiritual Advantages of a Difficult Childhood.
Mm.
I appreciate just everything that I have.
Yeah. And actually, Alan, I wanted to ask because I guess this is tied into that, which is how do you personally change your feelings internally to deal with like challenging situations, like such as, the pandemic, or even just being told that, maybe the function of your hands won't be what they would be like what they were before, so how do you kind of deal with those feelings? Like, what do you do with them? Do you just sit with it, or?
Well, wonderful that you asked about your feelings. Um, I'm very involved in the world of Buddhism and Buddhist studies and practice. And one thing that we know about feelings, whether they feel good or feel bad, or in the Buddhist terminology, we talk about pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Uh, Feelings have a characteristic that is part of all feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or whatever, and that is they're impermanent. A feeling that arises, it may intensify, but then it fades away. It may come right back again. It may come back so quickly that we think we're feeling that for hours or days or weeks. Uh, but now, only within the last 30, 40 years, can scientists actually see what's happening with those diodes that they place on the brain. Uh, and they see different colors lighting up. And it's astonishing how short the life of a feeling is. I would tell you what the current feeling is, but it'll be different tomorrow. But it's very, very short. So, in the world that I practice, it's it's a matter of trying to see and be aware of what you're feeling. And yes, some people do use the terminology being with your feelings, but more specifically, actually, um, I'm saying seeing. You don't see a feeling, but you can feel it and you can identify it. You might have to search a little bit. If I said to you right now, Shwati, what are you feeling right now? Quick, one word. What are you feeling?
Contemplative.
Contemplative is not a feeling, but that's okay. There are fewer feelings than you might realize. Um, so I'll do that to me. What are you feeling? I feel very pleasant. I feel very welcomed by you, which is a very pleasant
Good.
feeling. Now, usually when we're talking about how do we deal with a feeling, we're talking about unpleasant feelings, sadness, anger, um, realizing we've been abandoned. And the practice of meditation becomes very valuable here because in normal everyday life, we're just too busy.
Mm.
We're not just moving around physically, but the mind is always going thought to feeling, feeling to thought, physical sensation, etc. When we sit down and stop, which is not easy to do, first of all, and perhaps close your eyes and let the body get still. After a while, with practice and usually some guidance, we can become more familiar with what is actually going on in our mind in a given moment. It's through a practice of a word that's become very popular today, mindfulness. Everybody uses the word. I don't know how many people understand the word, but it's very popular. So it's not a matter of how do I change my feelings. It's really noticing that the feelings are going to change anyway. You don't have to bother changing them. They only appear not to change when we cling to them or we write stories with them. And I should give you an example because that might not sound like it makes sense. Um, let's say you have lunch with your girlfriends, which maybe you have at some time done that.
Yeah.
And one of them says something that makes you go, Oh, that didn't feel very good. She didn't say anything. But later, that what she said comes back to me. Oh, and what the mind might do is, why does she say that? That's absolutely not true. I never did that. I never intended it. She knows I wouldn't do that. And she says it right in front of everybody. Jane and Barbara. And oh, now they're never going to trust me again. You see, what I've done
Mm.
is I've written a story, and I could go on and on and on and on about that. The reality is, at lunch, Jane said that you did such and such.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the entire reality. All of the rest are the stories that we add to it. When we sit quietly, we begin to see that. So, what's the advantage? What's gained by beginning to see that? First of all, we become calmer because it's really not the end of the world. And it's not true that everybody hates me. And it's very possible that the other three ladies at the table knew that wasn't true. They didn't hear it the way I heard it because they didn't really care. Now that I'm calm, I'm going to call Jane and say, I felt upset when you said that. I care about you. I care about our relationship. Can we talk about that?
Mm.
Which is different than if in that moment we react and said, Jane, excuse me, how could that's because now we're in conflict
Yeah.
and the relationship is in danger. So it starts with your question. What am I feeling?
Mm.
What am I feeling? Not whether the feeling is justified or not, because really it doesn't matter. It's what I'm feeling.
Mm.
I may think it's absolutely unjustified. And now when I'm calm, I can address that, or maybe I choose not to address it. Maybe I realize now it's just not that important.
Mm.
I read a
Definitely.
wonderful line the other day, as if I can remember this now. We spend a lot of time worrying about what people think of us without realizing that they rarely do.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
And actually, given that you have all this sort of practice for the last 20, 30 years of meditation and mindfulness, would you say it's helped you in the healing process?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
But I always like to emphasize that I can't prove that.
Mm.
I mean, how would I prove it? There was, this has always been one of people's favorite stories, and it's absolutely true. And it sounds like you read Through the Flames, so you'll remember this. Immediately after the crash, when I finally jumped out of the plane, I was being helped away from the plane just before it exploded. And so we were going up a slope, and it was lined with people who had heard the crash, seen the smoke, and they were all peering in, some from the right, some from the left. And I noticed that everyone who looked at me looked, they just looked like they were seeing something terrible. And I said to the person who was helping me, I must look really awful right now. I didn't realize all my clothes were burnt off, and this should say too much of this. I didn't look good. Let's say that. I had really been injured, and so as we walked past these people, and they were very close, a woman I would describe as nondescript. I couldn't tell you a thing about what she looked like except nondescript. I'd never seen her before. I've never seen her again. She didn't look the way the other people looked. When I got very close to her, she leaned out from the crowd and she whispered to me, "You will be all right, sir." Now, just imagine how my religious friends have interpreted that. Who was that woman?
Indeed. Who was that woman? But gave you a kind word on the right time.
Well, and how about the fact that 8.5 years later, I remember it exactly to share it with you?
Mm. Amazing that.
Yeah.
I do wonder where she is.
Yeah.
I do remember reading that in the book, and I was just like, that's really kind of, it makes sort of the hairs stand on the back of your neck. It really does, doesn't it? It's just like, my God. Um, and actually, do you think our sort of traumatic experiences are part of what like the Buddhists call, was it law of dependent origination?
Hey, very good.
So it is like cause and effect or conditionality.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
You put a question in front of that, and I didn't really hear it.
So I
I
was
was
just
so
wondering.
impressed. I was so impressed that you knew about dependent origination. What was the question?
Oh, this was all from your book, and I was just like, so you definitely believe in this notion that it is just trauma is just meant to be. It's just the way it happens sometimes, isn't it?
Well, I don't know that I would want to say it's meant to be, um, but that's very close. It's not incorrect, but it could be misleading. So it's meant to be in the sense that here is my pencil. If I let go of this, which way is it going to go?
Yeah.
Down, but not up.
No.
It's not going to go this way
No. You know
or that way.
exactly.
Okay.
Unless you move it, that's
Throw
it.
it, yeah.
Mm.
But if I just let go of it, it's going to go down. So it goes down because of something that we all know about, but probably very few of us really understand. That's called the law of gravity.
Mm.
Dependent origination is as logical as that. For the two of us to be where we are right now, I'm sitting on a chair. There's a shoji screen behind me. You are sitting, I'm not sure where. There may be a white wall behind you, or what looks like a white wall, and maybe some glare from a window behind your left shoulder. But you didn't just drop out of the sky to get there.
No.
About 45, 50 minutes ago, you made certain decisions and certain physical movements, such as walking to the chair on which you are sitting, as did I.
Mm.
I didn't just drop out of the sky either. There's a logic to how we come to each and every moment that exists in space and time.
Mm.
And that moment, of course, is constantly changing. And as you observed, if instead of dropping, I throw, there's going to be an entirely different effect from the cause of throwing.
Mm.
The significance of this on a higher level. Well, let's take it on the mundane level, first of all, for a moment. If I step out into the street without observing the traffic lights and I'm hit by a car, there's a certain logic to that.
Mm.
I walked out where it was not safe to be, and there happened to be a car coming. It happened. A certain series of events brought that plane down that I was in, and there's an absolute logic to it.
Mm.
Part of the logic for me is I made a decision that morning to go to the little tiny airport. I chose the seat that I was sitting in. with my wife next to me.
Mm.
So how about this? The couple sitting directly in front of us got out of the plane with a scratch. The woman sitting directly behind me, who was our guide for the first week, was killed.
Yeah.
The causes and conditions, all we see of them is they were sitting in front, I was sitting here, and she was sitting behind us. We all had a different experience. Very dramatic example.
Indeed.
I believe that you and I and all of us come very close all the time to various situations that don't happen.
Mm.
How many times did someone stop I'll say here, the language I know, 3 blocks away, and the light was just turning amber, and they said, oh, I'll stop.
Mm.
And how do I know if they had chosen instead to go through the light, how that might have affected my life?
Mm. Yeah.
How do I know? Because I actually had an experience, well, a friend had an experience. How do I know when I'm walking down the street and my wife calls to me, Alan, wait a minute, you forgot something, and I stop and I turn around and I turn back? My experience going forward is entirely different than it would have been if I had kept going.
Mm.
Maybe in a dramatic way, maybe in a mundane way. There was a famous story here after the experience of 9/11. A man living in the suburbs left his home heading for the railroad to come into the city. He suddenly realized, oh, I forgot my briefcase and I have to get it. He went back, fumbled with his key, opened the door, picked up his briefcase, got it, ran to the train station, and missed his train, and therefore didn't make it to his appointment in the World Trade Center.
So lucky.
It's causes and conditions.
Mm.
And how many people, a good friend of mine, once a year, his company met in the World Trade Center. That was the day.
Yeah. Same thing. My father was supposed to go on the tube the day that the bomb blast happened on the tube. Um, on that tube, but he happened to be late for
Yeah,
work
yeah.
that day. It's a strange thing.
Yeah, and those are the big examples that we can see, but this is going on all the time.
Mm.
Everything, as it evolves, every moment is evolving, which is why philosophers and poets tell us don't waste time.
Indeed,
And by the way,
definitely.
sometimes being really busy is also wasting time, but use your time because it's very limited.
Yeah, and actually, that's a really good point because I find not just, I guess, not just me, a lot of people, is just clinging to desires for things to be different to as they are. So, how do we stop doing that?
Are you sure you're not Buddhist?
I really believe in a lot of the practices.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Which, if I could take just a second, I want to comment on what you just said. I really believe in. One of the things that attracted me, we don't have many second generation Buddhists in the United States. I'm not
Oh.
one. I was born into a different religion and then moved to Buddhist practice. Um, it's such an important point that you just touched on. The desire for something to be different than the way it is fine. I would love for there to be world peace.
Mm.
Um, I'm certainly disillusioned, particularly in this country over the last 6 years. But if I said, if there can't be world peace in these last years of my life, however many there may be, I can never be happy without there being world peace. That's not wise. I don't serve anyone bringing my unhappiness. So our desire for things to be different than the way they are, and usually a desire for a specific something to be different than the way it is. Why doesn't he love me? Why didn't I get that job? Why did he get elected? All of that sort of thing, you see, is fine. These are perfectly human things to arise. But then we also need to know, how do we release ourselves from the clinging to that? Some things we don't want to release. I will go to the end of my life wishing we could have world peace. And I will do whatever I can. But if we back up a little bit, lately I've been using the term try to see a bigger picture. What if you could bring a bit of peace to one person? Because most of us are not in a position to bring about world peace. But one person? So I had a teacher years ago. She said, learn how to listen, because most people can't. And you will come across people who have never had anyone listen to them. And you could be the first one. But you have to, to be a listener, you have to be able to let go of your thoughts, your opinions, your views, even just for a few minutes, so we can
Yeah.
hear others. Doesn't mean you become a blob. It just means you're willing to hear the other person, no matter how far afield it is from your views.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I guess I remember trying to do some kind of coaching, and they talked about active listening, which is, I think, one of the sort of key elements to be able to communicate. Um, and there's a bit of a dearth
I have a
where
feeling that you're very good at what you do because you listen well.
I hope so. I enjoy listening to people.
Nice.
I think people have very important things to say.
Yeah.
Hmm. And actually, this was, I think, quite linked to this, which is, why do you think people struggle to accept change, even though impermanence is inevitable?
Well, change is uncomfortable. What we would like is um, solid ground beneath our feet, knowing that no matter what happens, this will always be this way. Um,
Mm.
People who have very strong religious beliefs uh, can believe that uh, there is a spiritual force, a consciousness, sometimes referred to as God, that will always be there for them, no matter what happens. Uh, an event like 9/11 here in this country was very, very disturbing for literally thousands of clergy in this country, because they had no explanation for what they were seeing. Those of us who went to the scene to try to help, what we were seeing, uh, there was no explanation for how things like that happen. If this world is supposed to be a good and sacred place. Um, but I think the simplest answer to your profound question is change is uncomfortable, even if it's
Mm.
positive. Quick example, you just learned that you've been selected and you got the new job that you applied for, and it pays twice as much as your current job, and you're going to be working for this wonderful company with wonderful people, and you have a big office with a big window, and it's so great. And this is early in June, and you'll be starting on July 1st. And from now to July 1st, think, oh, this is wonderful, it's great, and I sure hope they like me there. I mean, suddenly giving me a lot of money, and I hope I have all the skills they think I have. And yeah, I mean, why would they be treating me like that? I never had a job like this. And this positive change brings about anxiety. Can, it doesn't always, of course, but it can.
Mm.
This,
The fear.
yeah, change is, it's not comfortable.
No. And actually, do you think personally, or maybe, do you think you can find happiness in all situations?
No, I don't think all situations are happy.
No.
Um, no, some situations are truly sad. We experience loss, um, but I think that we can learn to see all situations more realistically, rather than, as we spoke about earlier, the add-ons that we add to the actual situation. You know, I'll use a very dramatic example, because I know I have to wrap up with you interviewing someone who is looking for a better job, actually. Um, uh, when a loved one dies, we know that everyone dies. There's nothing surprising about that. Even if we didn't expect that person to die, we say, I didn't expect it, but yes, all people died. What is our suffering about?
Mm.
The suffering is because we didn't want that to happen. We want that loved one still to be with us.
Mm.
And it's difficult to deal with the fact that that will never again be.
Mm.
We express it as my loved one died, but gradually we can live into the reality that only my memory survives at this point.
Mm.
But is there happiness inherent in that? No, I don't think so.
No. And just one more question before I let you go, because I had like hundreds of questions, to be fair.
Maybe we
But
can meet again sometime.
I hope so. I hope so, because there's just so much, isn't there? And I was just wondering, can we ever be cured, like just beyond just healing and recovery?
Well, from the Buddhist perspective, the answer to that is yes. It's a state that's called nirvana.
Mm.
Nirvana is not a place. It's a state of not creating difficulties, or again, we use that word dukkha, suffering, not creating unhappiness. But unhappiness exists when we can see it for what it is, even if it's injustice. That is not just. I want to do something about that. With that kind of approach, rather than I'm going to, because that's upsetting to me.
Yeah.
But I think I can do something about that, and I must give it a try. Has a different feel. So those moments I don't think are filled with happiness, but when you put your head down on the pillow at night, you sleep easier.
Mm, definitely.
There's a sense of I put out full effort,
Mm,
and that's the best that I could do at this moment. Maybe in a week I could do a lot better.
yeah, definitely.
I regret that I must leave
Yes,
you for
of course.
now. It was absolute pleasure to spend some time
You
with you.
too. You too. Amazing. Amazing. I hope you're thanking your body every day with that somatic experiencing. I like that.
Do you hear the heavy, heavy rain that just
I
hit
was
us?
I was just about to ask, is that like hailstones?
It's a very heavy downpour.
Oh wow. Oh, hopefully you're not going outside.
No, I'm going to stay in here and chat on Zoom some more.
Thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And lots of healing.
Yes, you too. You too.
All right. Be safe and be well.
You too. Thanks a lot and hope to speak to you soon.
My pleasure. Bye now.
Bye.